So welcome everybody. ANC3C is hosting DDOT this evening to talk about the Connecticut Avenue reversible lane study that's been going on, discussing the operations and safety of Connecticut Avenue and the reversible lanes, and they have several plans to present to us. We're joined this evening by several wonderful neighborhood organizations, including Cleveland Park Citizens Association, Cleveland Park Smart Growth, and the Woodland Normanstone Neighborhood Association. And I will allow, or rather ask that each of those folks, each of the representatives of those organizations introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Jen Bell. Give me a second to unmute Jen. Hi, Jen, could you unmute yourself?
I just unmuted, yeah. Great. I think that Nancy Bryant may want to say something, and then if necessary, or if she wants me to, I'll add comments to that.
Okay, well, Nancy, you should have a little thing popping up asking you to unmute. Well, Jen, it seems like it's up to you.
Okay, I'm happy to introduce myself. I'm Jen Bell. I'm Vice President of the Woodland Normanstone Neighborhood Association. We have a very close connection to Connecticut Avenue because we're only a couple of blocks away. And we have several concerns, which I hope will be addressed during our meeting today. We very much support our commercial business owners and are concerned about anything that this study may recommend that would affect them. We also are concerned for ourselves because we like using them. It's very convenient to use neighborhood stores and support them. And of course, being able to park to pick up laundry, flowers, groceries, whatever, drugstore items is very important to us. I also walk down there, but in order to keep them thriving, we've got to do everything possible to support them. Also, our neighborhood is one of those neighborhoods that Waze directs traffic into when there is a backup on Reno Road or Connecticut Avenue. So we're very concerned about the possible traffic numbers that have been mentioned, or the additional flow of traffic to streets other than Connecticut Avenue. And we feel like that would have a big impact on our neighborhood. So cars speed through the neighborhood already. We know from being out in the morning during rush hour that Reno Road is already heavily burdened, and any additional traffic that might be diverted to that road and other roads is a big concern to us. So we're happy to be included and to be supportive of the presentation tonight.
Well, thank you, Jen. We also have Bar Weiner with us this evening from Cleveland Park Citizens Association. Bar, thank you for joining. Would you care to introduce yourself and your organization?
Sure. Thank you very much, Bo, and nice to see you, Jen. My name is Bar Weiner. As Bo said, I'm the president of the Cleveland Park Citizens Association, and we're very happy to co-host tonight. I guess this is the third or fourth time that the DDOT folks have been in the neighborhood to talk with us, which is terrific, or more actually. Really appreciate their effort to engage the neighborhood before they go into their sort of full-blown public mode, so to speak. Having gone through the presentation a bit already, I really appreciate the level of care and detail in addressing kind of key questions. We don't really have a position on this project.
There's no real requirement that we get it turned in.
I'm sorry. We don't really have a position on this project as yet. We're really just trying to gather information, but certainly we're interested in the issues about how to share the road with bikes and how to ensure that the neighborhood businesses remain vital. That's one of our mission areas. Is really kind of the vitality of the neighborhood. So those are key issues. And of course, simply fundamentally traffic safety is the paramount issue here. We just want to understand what the risks are that might be raised by alternative approaches, what the risks are today, what can be done about them. So we're looking forward to hearing more and having a chance to ask more questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bar. We also have Bob Ward representing Cleveland Park Smart Growth joining us this evening. Thank you, Bob, for co-hosting with us. Bob, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization?
Sure. Thanks, Bo. Cleveland Park Smart Growth is a community organization with members in the I'll say greater Cleveland Park area. It's mostly Cleveland Park, but it also includes Woodley Park and Van Ness. And Connecticut Avenue is certainly a focus. Our mission is to support urbanism in the area, and we, do education and advocacy to promote economic vitality in our area, sustainability, and inclusiveness. And this is an issue that our group has been involved in. We have a task force on this project. One of the concepts that will be reviewed is you'll view it from the trash can. It was one of our products, but despite that, we're very excited about the study and look forward to the presentation. And I know a lot of our members are on and are looking forward to asking questions. So thanks for having us. And without further ado, I guess we'll hear from Ed.
Well, thank you, Bob, Bar, and Jen. We really appreciate you all being able to join ANC 3C this evening. Ed, without further ado, it's your show.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I think we presented to ANC 3C last summer when we were in the midst of developing concepts. And from the summer through the fall and in late December, we finished our traffic analysis, and then we presented that traffic analysis to our Citizen Advisory Committee. We started the project about a year ago, a little over a year ago in January, and we went through data collection before COVID, and we can go over a lot of the data and the analysis this evening, and we hope to be able to answer your questions. Let me give you a little bit of the overview. You may have seen a couple of these preliminary slides several months ago, but just to get you acclimated again to the study. Why are we doing this study? Well, there was 20 years ago, there was an effort in 2003 to look at whether or not the District of Columbia should remove the reversible lane system. And through the 20-year period, there's been studies and recommendations on and off about the reversible lanes and about potential protected bicycle facilities. In 2018, 3 of the ANCs, ANC 3C, ANC 3F, and ANC 4G basically developed resolutions asking DDOT to craft a request for qualifications so that we could have a consultant come in and help us make a determination as to whether the reversible lanes should be removed or should be retained. And in addition to look at the bicycle facilities. On to the next slide. So really the project goals, as I've just stated, one is to reduce crashes and improve safety for all users, to consider a protected bicycle lane, and really to assess the feasibility of removing reversible lane operations. So really part of the study is focusing on Vision Zero, and the other component of the study is looking at multimodal and operational safety impacts. So again, it's kind of a two-pronged study, and the scope of the study was really was developed by the ANCs. You helped us develop the scope. So a lot of things that you may be asking may be outside of the study framework, but we've tried to do as much as we could within the resources that we've had. I can tell you that we did some post or COVID traffic counts, and I don't have these in the slide set, but just so everyone knows, traffic on Connecticut Avenue is down by about 50% compared to what it was during pre-COVID conditions. This is our study area, and our study area goes from Legation Street on the north to Calvert Street on the south. We have 24 intersections within our primary study area. The red that you see is what we're calling the secondary study area, and that's bounded by Western Avenue, Mass Avenue, DuPont Circle, and Broad Branch Road and Beach Drive. And as you can see on the right, there's a Connecticut Avenue is just a swath in the region, and you can see where we fit in within the regional context. This chart, the next two charts really give you a sense of where we started and where we're at right now. The red is where we're at right now. This winter, we've completed a number of detailed traffic operation analysis and our safety analysis. And right now we're holding some preliminary meetings with our stakeholders before we get to a public meeting. And I want to emphasize that I have no idea as to where the study is going to turn out, whether we'll pick an alternative with bicycle lanes or whether we won't, or whether we'll have a do nothing alternative. I'm asking you as the community, I'm asking you as the ANC, what your vision is, what you'd like to see Connecticut Avenue is in the future, because we're looking not only in this year or next year, but we're really looking at the vision. You know, what do you see Connecticut Avenue in 25 years? And that's really where the traffic numbers and our safety numbers we're trying to get at. So what is the future of Connecticut Avenue? As you can see on the second slide, we're trying to hold a public meeting in March. I think we have a date. Charlotte can talk a little bit about the date later on, but we're aiming for the 30th of March and April 1st. So we're looking at a meeting that would be 2 days. We'd probably have some breakout sessions for each meeting, as well as a general meeting. So we want to be able to accommodate the businesses in our public meeting, and we want to be able to accommodate those that can't make it during the day. So we'll have a day meeting and an evening meeting, and it will be virtual. We have a community advisory committee, and as you can see, the folks on the community advisory committee listed on the slide. We've been meeting with the ANCs. We've been meeting with the Main Street organizations. Last week, we met with the Woodley Park Main Street organization, Van Ness and Cleveland Park Main Street. So we've met with the institutional stakeholders, UDC and Howard University School of Law and others. So we're really trying to understand the needs and the desires from all aspects of the community, as you said, Bo, before we get to that public meeting. Here's a sample of the meetings that we've had over the last year. As you can see, they're numerous, and it really gives us a flavor for you know, what people's needs are. And you can see the meetings that we're holding in 2021 as well. This is just a shot of the reversible lane signage. One of the issues in the community is the visibility of the reversible lane signage. It's difficult for motorists to see along the corridor. The roadway geometry, what this slide shows is we have 4 lanes going inbound in the morning along Connecticut Avenue and 2 lanes going outbound in the morning. In the evening, that geometry is reversed. We have an existing 60-foot curb to curb width, and it consists of 6 10-foot travel and parking lanes. Here's a little bit about safety. You may have seen this slide before, but we have about 1,500 crashes, police reported crashes during the 5-year period between 2015 and 2019. The reversible lane basically is in effect 15% of the time, but we have 44% of the crashes during that time period. I think, Bar, you had a question, and I'll try to answer that very quickly right now. I think your question is, how did we get 15%? And what we do is we take 5 hours a day for the reversible lanes, 5 days a week, that's 25 hours. And then we look at 168-hour week, and that gives us 15%. The average daily traffic on Connecticut Avenue, we have 30 to 32,000 vehicles per day in the northern part of Connecticut Avenue, and about 24,000 cars a day on the southern portion of Connecticut Avenue. We have 12,000 cars per day on Reno Road, around 24 to 28,000 vehicles per day on Wisconsin Avenue, and around the same number on Mass Avenue. What this slide shows you is the origin and destinations of traffic along Connecticut Avenue. We basically used big data. This is cell phone data. And what this shows us is that if you look at, we looked at a portion of Connecticut Avenue north of Military, from Van Ness to Upton, and from south of Calvert. And really what this shows you is that 40 to 50% of the traffic on Connecticut Avenue is deemed as through traffic. And what does this mean? It means that traffic has neither an origin or destination within the Connecticut Avenue corridor. It's basically going through. So it may start in Maryland, it may start somewhere else, it may go to Virginia, it may go to Washington, but it has neither an origin or destination in Connecticut Avenue. And I think what this supports is a lot of the public and your concerns that you told me this summer, your feeling and your perceptions about the kinds of traffic that really traverses Connecticut Avenue. Cynthia is going to talk a little bit about the alternatives right now. And we have a number of alternatives that she will go through. She'll talk about the geometry of the alternatives and some of the major elements of the concept, as well as some of the constraints that we see at this point. Cynthia?
Great, thanks, Ed. This slide just kind of gives you a sense of the guiding principles that we're using kind of as a way to both judge and rate some of the alternatives moving forward. The guiding principles such as quality of life, so accommodating the needs of those who live, work, play along Connecticut Avenue. Really, the bulk of this study is looking at safety in Vision Zero, so reducing the number of crashes and fatalities, looking at traffic operations to mitigate significant impact on any alternative that we're considering, retaining some parking and loading, especially in the commercial areas, and really emphasizing a multimodal nature where we can be accommodating safe movement and passage of pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit. And for the scope of our work, we're really just focusing in on the 60-foot curb-to-curb right-of-way as a cross-section. So these are kind of the guiding principles, like we talked about before, that will be used to help rate some of these alternatives moving forward. Next slide. So DDOT did start with 4 base concepts, what we're calling build concepts, concepts A, B, C, and D, O, plus a no build, so 5 concepts in total. And as we've gone through the process of meeting with the public and our community advisory committee, we've added a couple more as part of our evaluation. So concepts D1, D2, and concept E. What we're noticing in our first kind of run through of the analysis is that some of these concepts would require upgrading to MUTCD compliant overhead signals. And we have met with CFA to talk about that and begin that discussion. And we've heard that they are not supportive of any overhead signage. Regardless of what we what we will be talking about tonight, all these concepts will be carried forward within our public meeting, which is scheduled for the spring of this year. And as we go through this presentation later on, Ed and Michael will talk about the evaluation matrix, which we've been using as a way to start figuring out pros and cons and fatal flaws of each of these alternatives. Regardless, all of these alternatives will include a number of safety and mobility improvements and potential for speed reduction limitations along Connecticut Avenue. And we really did focus our traffic analysis on mostly 3 different concepts that we saw that didn't have significant fatal flaws, which were the no build, concept B and C, which we'll talk about later. Next slide. So this is our no build management option. This is essentially we're using this as the model base concept. It's similar to operations pre-COVID, where there is a 2-lane reversible lane system. There would be no upgrades to overhead signals or signage in this specific alternative. Similar to pre-COVID conditions, it's 4 lanes inbound and 2 lanes outbound during the AM peak. And then in the reverse during the PM, it'd be 4 lanes outbound and 2 lanes inbound. And during off-peak periods, there's 2 travel lanes in each direction, northbound and southbound, and parking on both sides of Connecticut Avenue. This concept would include some intersection improvements to enhance accessibility and safety. And like we said before, this is a baseline concept to measure the kind of impacts that would be happening. Yes, that's all. Next slide, please. This slide shows just a cross-section of a section of the corridor today. So the two images on the right, the AM and PM peak conditions do show the reversible lanes in effect. And then on the left side, during off-peak conditions, it's 2 lane in each direction with parking on both sides. I'll let you guys take a look at this a little bit closer. All right, next slide. So concept A does retain the 2 lane reversible lane system. It would require an upgrade of overhead lane signals and signage. During this alternative, during the peak hour, there would be 3 lanes in the peak travel direction, and then only one travel lane in the off-peak direction. So for example, during the AM, it'd be 3 southbound and only 1 northbound, and then the opposite during the PM. During the off-peak direction, there would be 2 northbound lanes and 2 southbound lanes, and there would be no parking. However, there would be a protected bike lane that is buffered on both sides of Connecticut Avenue along the corridor. So the key takeaway from this is that one of the key takeaways is that parking would need to be removed, and there's around 600 spaces along the corridor. Next slide. Concept B removes the reversible lane system entirely. During the peak hour operation, there would be 3 northbound lanes and 3 southbound lanes. And during the off-peak period, there would be 2 northbound lanes and 2 southbound lanes with parking and loading on both sides of Connecticut Avenue. The key takeaway from this is that there's also no bicycle lane that would be provided. No parking would be removed as part of this concept. And as in pre-COVID conditions, parking would not be permitted during peak hour, but only during off-peak hours. Next slide. And this shows a typical cross-section. So during the peak hour, the image on the bottom shows 3 travel lanes in each direction during the AM and PM peak. And during off-peak hours, 2 lanes in each direction with parking/loading on both sides of the road. And then concept C removes the reversible lane system entirely. This concept shows a peak period and off-peak period operations that is consistent throughout the course of the day. So 2 northbound and 2 southbound travel lanes would be retained. There would be protected bike lanes on both sides of the street on the east and west side. And then in some locations where it's needed, there would be a specific left turn pocket dedicated for vehicles, in which case the buffered bike lane would be squeezed down a little bit and parking would not be allowed in that location. Overall, the traffic operations are fairly manageable in terms of impact. This would remove around 500 spaces along the corridor. However, we are working to retain around 120 spaces in the commercial areas to provide loading and parking needs for businesses. Next slide. So this cross-section shows you a number of different places along the corridor. So to the left, that's our standard operation of 2 travel lanes in each direction with a buffered bike lane with around 4 feet and a 5-foot bike lane. As we move toward intersections where left turn pockets are needed, there's no parking for vehicles. However, the buffer is reduced. And then the travel lane is also slightly reduced to allow for a left turn pocket. And then going toward the right in locations where there's a commercial activity center where parking and loading is needed, there is an accommodation for that with shifting some of the travel lane and bike lane space toward the parking. Next slide. This also is just a rendering. It's showing on the left, like a bus floating island where that helps to prevent some conflicts between people boarding and alighting buses and cyclists, as well as not having the bus needing to pull off of the travel lane into the curb and having to go back into traffic, which also saves with the frequency of buses and their ability to kind of be on time. And then on the right, it just shows a left turn pocket at Porter, where parking would need to be reduced to accommodate both the left turn pocket and the protected cycle track, protected bike lane, sorry. Next slide. This is a zoom in of the commercial parking area a little bit more. So accommodating about a 9 to 10 foot commercial parking and loading lane, while retaining 2 lanes in each direction and a buffered bike lane on both sides of the street. Next slide, please. So this is concept we're calling DO. This concept removes one reversible lane system. It does require an upgrade for signage for MUTCD standards. During the peak hour lane operations, there's 3 travel lanes in the peak direction and 2 travel lanes in the off-peak direction. And then during the off-peak period, there would be 2 northbound and 2 southbound travel lanes and a northbound parking lane / loading lane. One thing that we do need to note is that as part of our bicycle facility design guideline, when we do have a 2-way cycle track, which we are showing on this western edge of the street, there needs to be protected phasing for left turn vehicles based on the volumes of cars and bicycles to reduce conflicts. This specific design would make it really difficult to include those left turn pockets because of the reversible lane. And also throughout different parts of the city, there's sometimes initial conflict for pedestrians and 2-way cycle tracks, just because you need to kind of look both ways and not necessarily knowing to look one way or the other. So some conflicts arise with that as well. But yes, this is DO. Next slide, please. Concept D1 is very similar with the 2-way cycle track on the western side of the street. It does remove the reversible lane system. Traffic operations all day would be 2 lanes northbound and 2 lanes southbound. And then depending on the locational needs along the corridor, there could be a northbound parking loading lane, as we're showing on the right side cross section, or there would be a northbound, southbound left turn pocket lane as well. So like DO, this does provide a 2-way protected cycle track. And because there is the opportunity to provide left turn pockets for vehicles that are protected phasing, that would negate some opportunities to allow for parking at specific intersections. So for the most part, we might need to default to the option on the right that shows a left turn pocket and 2 travel lanes northbound. Next slide, please. Concept D2 removes the reversible lane system. This, during the peak hour, has 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes with a 2-way center left turn lane that is consistent along the corridor. During the off-peak period, there would only be 1 lane northbound and 2 lanes southbound, and the 2-way center left turn lane would remain. However, in this off-peak period, northbound parking and loading lanes on the eastern edge would be allowed. And this does provide protected cycle track. So similar to the other concept before, having 1 lane in the northbound off-peak period. Next slide. And this is the last concept we'll talk about, which is concept E. This concept removes the reversible lane system entirely. During the peak and off-peak periods, there would be 2 northbound and 2 southbound travel lanes with parking and loading lanes on both sides. This also does provide a 2-way protected cycle track. The key takeaway from this, however, is that this does require DDOT to use right away that is outside of the study limit, which is the 60-foot curb to curb, which does not conform to the guiding principles of this project. It also would require additional coordination with stakeholders along the corridor like WMATA, and then also some conflicts might present itself because part of this corridor is in the Cleveland Park streetscape project design, which we would not be able to impact based on the moratorium for when that project finishes and when this would start. Next slide. This just is showing a map of all the ongoing and recent improvements that are happening along portions of the corridor as part of both the Cleveland Park streetscape and drainage project, as well as signal timing optimization, which is happening at the moment. So things such as improvements to crossing time, adding leading pedestrian intervals, existing and proposed slow streets that are happening, and just understanding that these are things that we'll be incorporating as part of our project. Next slide. So we've also identified some potential safety and mobility improvement additions that can be appended to several concepts. Some of the ones that we're noting on this slide right now can be added to the no build and other countermeasures that are specific to a specific concept. So things such as hawk signals, no turn on red, far side bus stops, et cetera. And these are elements that we'll be incorporating more at the 10% design level. Next slide. So as we've gone through this analysis and as we'll walk through the evaluation matrix a little bit more, we're realizing that overall, all these options and alternatives, with all of these, it's really difficult to meet the full purpose and need of the project. There are lots of trade-offs that are happening, both with balancing the need to have the reversible lanes removed for safety, but then accommodating parking, protected bike lanes, and making things that are standard. I think one thing that we'll need to note is as we move forward, talking with the community and making sure that we're understanding what those trade-offs are. And we do note that the no build management option, although it doesn't appear to meet the purpose and need of the project and doesn't necessarily reduce crashes and retains the reversible lanes, there are opportunities for us to be using that as a baseline to understand what the improvements would be with the alternatives that we're proposing. All right, and I think I would pass it back over to you, Ed.
Thank you, Cynthia. We just have a few slides on our alternatives evaluation. We created a matrix and we did a little scoring from +2 to -2, and some of the criteria that we looked at include safety, operations, bicycle ped, and transit accessibility. We looked at parking and pickup and drop-off areas and constructability as well. And embedded in all of our analysis is looking at the consistency with the District of Columbia plans, including Move DC, our bicycle master plan, Vision Zero, Sustainable DC 2.0, our carbon neutrality goals, and the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Amendment Act of 2016. This just summarizes, this evaluation matrix summarizes our assessment of where we think the concepts land on each of the evaluation criteria. And as you can see, concept E, the screening for fatal flaw was, it did, as Cynthia said, it does go out of the 60-foot curb to curb width. And for the other ones, you can see a number of scores, but really the key takeaway from this is that we have positive numbers for concepts B and C, and they're both about equal. And again, I would say try not to focus on the individual numbers per se, but kind of look at the aggregate of the bottom line of what do we think the concepts, which concepts rise to the top. And we've determined that concepts B and C rise to the top. In terms of potential safety benefits, if we remove the reversible lanes, we believe that we would get an overall 17% crash reduction. We also believe that we would get safety benefits from left turn calming treatments, slowing left turn vehicles, and that would help us reduce conflicts with pedestrians. Again, for alternative C, I have another slide that I'll show you now. Again, the same level of safety benefit, about a 17% reduction in terms of crashes during the peak periods when the reversible lane is in operation. Protected bicycle lanes, what that would happen, that would slow the traffic, and as a result of slowing the traffic, that would decrease some of the severity of the crashes, of the vehicle crashes and the pedestrian crashes. So you slow the speeds, you have less people with serious injuries and less folks with fatalities. Adding turn lanes, if we add turn lanes at selected intersections, we would get about a 27% crash reduction. If we remove parking near the corners of the intersections, if there's one space, two spaces where there are visibility problems, we could get about a 20% reduction in crashes. And if we implement a pedestrian refuge island, that would give us about a 26% reduction in crashes. Again, these are general numbers and they're not all additive. If you put all of these in, you're not going to get more than 100% of crash reduction. But generally, these give you kind of an order of magnitude estimate of where we might see potential safety benefits. This is a parking summary, and so what it does is it arrays the concepts on the columns, and the rows. Basically, we have separated Connecticut Avenue into 10 different segments, and basically we've looked at the number of total available spaces within each of the segments and how many spaces might be removed within each of the concepts. And as you can see, there are around 600 spaces in the entirety of the corridor. Concept B would, as we indicated earlier, would remove around 500 spaces. Concept B would not remove any spaces. In terms of our traffic analysis, I'm going to take a few slides and then Michael Glickman will take some of the slides after I give this introduction. We're focusing on concept B and C since our traffic model is sensitive to the number of lanes. So in the no build condition, that's 2045. We're looking, as I said, 25 years in the future. There would be no changes in the pre-COVID configuration of the lanes. In concept B, we would reduce the peak hour, peak direction lanes by 1. And in concept C, we would reduce the peak hour, peak direction lanes by 2 lanes. So we did a modeling exercise and we prepared 2045 traffic volume forecasts. And the forecasts are consistent with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments cooperative forecast for land use, employment, and populations within the corridor. We estimated traffic diversions. We conducted a capacity analysis, and then we did look at the relative travel time differences between the concepts. So the study does not take into account changes in traffic volumes on a year-to-year basis, like we're experiencing during pandemic conditions. The model that we have does not look at modal changes. So if we have a capacity issue, people would be expected to change modes, but the model that we have doesn't do that. So that all the numbers that you see tonight would be conservative numbers, because if there are capacity issues, then people would tend to divert to other modes as well, and our model just doesn't show that. This gives you an idea of the existing traffic volumes along Connecticut Avenue in 3 different segments. As you can see, Legation Street to Nebraska, Albemarle to Porter, Porter to North, and North Road to Calvert Street. And let me just take one segment to give you an example. Let's look at Albemarle Street to Porter. Today we have almost 32,000 cars per day. If we did nothing in 25 years, our models estimate that we would have around 34,500. If we constructed concept B, we would reduce that number to around 32,500. So around 2,000 cars. And then we would further reduce that number to around 28,000 vehicles per day if we implemented concept C. Let me just let you take a moment so you can look at the forecast. I know it's a lot of numbers.
Ed, could you tell us what AADT is again?
Average annual daily traffic. In other words, it's a 24-hour traffic volume.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make sure to put that on the future slides.
David will thank you tomorrow.
Okay, and this slide just gives you a sense of what the different modes, the magnitude of the different modes are in the corridor. Now we can't, it's not really all apples to apples, but it gives you a sense of order of magnitude. For example, if you look at today in the corridor, we have 24 to 32,000 cars per day. And, you know, let's just call it up to 30,000 cars a day here or there under the no build concept B or concept C. In terms of bus entry, in terms of bus usage, we have 4,300 passengers per day on average during a weekday in the corridor. And then to the right of the bus, I show the metro. And I looked at 2017 to 2019 entries into the metro system at Woodley Park, Cleveland Park, and Van Ness. And you can see roughly, call it 4,000 to 6,000 in each station. And bicycles today, roughly 30 to 90, depending upon where you're looking in the corridor, minimal. We did look at a long-term peak hour forecast with protected bicycle lanes. And as you can see, during the morning and evening, we have about 1,000 bicycles during the peak hour. And that number then would be around 3,000, 3,200 per day if we put a protected bicycle facility in. If we didn't put a protected bicycle facility in, you'd be looking at almost today's condition. It would remain essentially unchanged. These next two slides give you a little bit about the methodology and the algorithms that we used, and I won't go over that in this evening's meeting, but it gives you a sense of, you know, we looked at the peak hour numbers and then we looked at the curve for the day during a 24-hour period, and you can see, you know, the peak in the morning and then the peak in the afternoon, much less bicycle traffic during the middle of the day. And this gives you the rough numbers in terms of existing by segment, Calvert to Porter, Porter to Albemarle, Albemarle to Legation, the existing peak hour bicycle numbers, what we have today in the morning and in the evening, and then what we called a short-term peak hour number, maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, and then long-term, which would be, you know, post 5 years. Michael Glickman is now going to talk a little bit about traffic diversion and level of service and capacity. And I know these are a little bit complicated issues, so take some notes down, and we'll be glad to try to answer your notes once Michael's finished. Michael?
Thank you, Ed. As Ed indicated, the daily weekday traffic diversions were modeled for concepts B and C based on our 2045 no-build model. A portion of the diversion will occur within the secondary study area corridors, and others will be routed using regional facilities beyond the primary and secondary study areas. The daily diversions for concept B and C were then distributed over the 5-hour weekday morning period to account for inbound traffic diversions, and then the 5-hour weekday afternoon period to account for the outbound traffic diversions. Diversions were not expected to occur over the remaining 14 hours of the day. Next slide, please. So what we determined was that 55 to 60% of the diversions will occur within the secondary study area, and 40 to 45% will occur along the regional roadways such as Georgia Avenue, Clara Barton Parkway, Canal Road, I-495, MacArthur Boulevard, George Washington Parkway. As a result, of the 3,160 vehicle trips diverted under concept B. 1,920 would route to the secondary study area. And then 1,240 would route to the regional roadways that I just indicated. For concept C, the 7,020 trips, secondary study area would take on 3,980 of those trips, and the regional roadways would take on the remaining 3,130 trips. Next slide, please. So this slide represents diversions graphically using green lines to show decreases in peak hour volumes and blue lines to show increases in peak hour volumes. The lines are weighted based on the relative increase or decrease on a particular roadway. The blue and green numbers with arrows then represent the diverted peak hour directional volumes along the primary and secondary study area corridors. And one thing you can note is when you look at particularly at concept C, you can see how the roads for concept C, you can see the north-south corridors take on most of the diversions, but just to be aware, the thickness of the line doesn't necessarily represent the total diversion. It represents the relative difference between the diverted volume and the existing volume on those roadways. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this flow chart is to show how the peak hour diversions were calculated based on the total daily diversions for concepts B and C. The white letters represent concept B and the blue concept C. So for example, for concept B, you see 3,160 daily traffic volumes. As a 1,920 go to the secondary study area. Of that, 260 are peak hour oriented. And then those trips are spread amongst Massachusetts Avenue, Wisconsin, Reno, and Broad Branch. And you can see, so for instance, Wisconsin Avenue, that 3,160 daily vehicles translates to 100 additional cars on Wisconsin Avenue. And again, the daily volume was distributed over 5 hours in the peak direction peak period. So diversions would be incrementally less in the hours prior to and following that highest peak hour. Next slide, please. So for those that are not aware of the level of service term, it's essentially a grading system from A to F based on vehicle delay through an intersection. LOS and delay are reported for the highest peak hour in the morning and the highest peak hour in the evening. An intersection operating with under 55 seconds of delay is considered acceptable and denoted as a level of service D or better. An intersection with 55 seconds to 80 seconds of delay would be designated as level of service E, and that's considered to be operating under constrained conditions. Now, level of service F theoretically applies to anything above 80 seconds, but roadway user will generally just adjust their routes to offset excessive delay. So in other words, the network will balance itself out. And just to be clear, that so these levels of service, the most important thing for us in evaluating these alternatives was to see the relative difference between the no build concept B and concept C. And as we go through this, that's something that we focused on. Next slide, please. So before getting into the actual results in this slide, I just want to walk you through how to read the figure. When you see the three boxes pointing to an intersection, the box on the left represents the no build condition. The box in the middle represents concept B, and the box on the right represents concept C. If the box is filled with green, it is a level of service D or better. Level of service E is denoted by a yellow color, and then red would be F. When you see the single green box over an intersection, that just means that that intersection operates at level of service D or better under all conditions. So now we'll get into the AM peak hour in the primary study area. So that would be the area defined by the dashed line, so the corridor inside that dashed area. The intersection of Nebraska and Connecticut Avenue, that's shown where all three periods are red, which means that it's a level service F under all conditions analyzed. Another intersection that's consistent through all periods is Calvert and Connecticut Avenue. That's level service E through all periods. And then There are other intersections that you'll see, and this will apply to many conditions where sometimes under one concept, it'll slightly get, go from D to E or go from E to D, but generally speaking, they're manageable impacts at those intersections. So moving on to the secondary study area.
Yeah, and Michael, I just might I'll just add that if you see the total number of intersections in the corridor in this AM condition, we're only showing 1 out of 24 intersections that operate with that level of service condition.
Okay, thanks.
In either concept, no build B or C.
So moving on to the secondary study area, this is the area outside of that dashed box. And here, what you can see the intersections of Nebraska and Broad Branch, and then Beach Drive and Tilden. Those two intersections are operating at level service F through all conditions. And the intersection at Ward Circle, which is Massachusetts and Nebraska, when you see the red under concept C, it means that from no build, the intersection went from level service E to level service F. And again, to point to the table, as Ed indicated, you can see the comparison of the total intersections with overall F for each of the concepts. Next slide, please. Now we'll focus on the PM peak hour for the primary study area. Again, that's the area inside the dash box. Nebraska and Connecticut Avenue again comes up as an intersection that's operating at level service F through all conditions. One thing, and again, Calvert Street is also operating at level service E through all conditions. But one interesting point is that Cathedral in Connecticut improves from level service F to level service E as a result of concept C. And again, if you focus on that chart, you can see how the level service F for each of the components compares to one another. Next slide. We might want to take down this presentation. I think somebody's.
Somebody, I don't know where these lines are coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're on it trying to. Who's presenting?
Mike Lickman. I can put my video.
Yeah, someone's turned on annotations. Let's see if we can.
Hey, Ed, could you stop sharing your screen briefly?
Sure.
Thank you.
And my screen is good right now.
Thank you. Okay. So Ed, to the extent you're able to do so, can you guys continue for a couple minutes without the slides, and I will attempt to remedy the situation on the back end.
Sure. Michael, we're on PM secondary study area. You have your notes?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
And I have it on my screen as well. So
Great.
So for the secondary study area, that again, if you have this, it was the area outside of the box. The intersections that operate at level service F during all conditions include Western Avenue and River Road, Reno Road and Military Road, and then Nebraska and Ward Circle. And you can see, looking at the chart, that all three scenarios include the same number of intersections with level service F. So the next slide that you would see is relating to travel times along the corridor for no build, concept B and concept C. The intent of this comparison is to establish a relative difference in performance for each of the analyzed alternatives. And that's something that I talked about earlier. So for the peak hour, the peak southbound direction of the AM peak hour, and that if you have your own copy, it's the table on the top. Concept B would increase travel times by 3 minutes as compared to no build, and concept C would increase by 7 minutes as compared to no build. For the afternoon, the northbound direction, which is the peak direction, that would be represented on the bottom table if you have it in front of you. The overall travel time increased by 4 minutes for concept B and 8 minutes for concept C as compared to the no build condition.
Thanks, Michael.
Sure.
And I think this gets at Bar Weiner's questions that he one of the questions that he gave us, and that is if what would happen to buses? And since buses sit in the same traffic stream, if we implemented concept B, it would be a 3 to 4 minute increase in the peak direction, and in the evening it would be a 7 to 8 minute increase for buses and for cars. It wouldn't matter because everybody would be sitting in the same traffic stream. Okay, I think I just have a couple of next steps, and then we can get into questions. In terms of next steps, again, we're presenting our major findings of the traffic analysis to the ANCs and the stakeholders this month. We're beginning our preparation and logistics activities for a virtual public meeting at the end of March. We'll hold that public meeting, as I said, we think on March 30th and April 1st, and we will be getting rack cards out and email blasts out to notify the public, and we hope that the ANCs will help us get the word out as well. After the public meeting, we'll take all of your comments and then develop a recommendation for moving forward on a preferred concept. If we do move forward on a preferred concept, we would do a 10% design, and then we would follow that by environmental documentation. The next slide, you have our contact information, and then we also show you the project email and the project website address. So I'm going to close the formal presentation with that, and then Bo and others, we can open this up to questions, and apologize that we don't have our slides to go back to at the moment.
Ed, so I'm putting a link in the chat in a second. That'll be to the slides, and so you can direct people to the slides. That should work. I hope somebody clicks on it and double checks me on that. But thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Michael. That was really good. We're going to turn to questions now, folks, and thank you, Commissioner Siddiqui, for letting me know that link doesn't work. I will try to change that in a second, and I'll update the chat with it. But we're first going to move to ANC questions, and then each commissioner has a chance to ask a question, because we have a lot of people here tonight, which is wonderful. Then we'll move to a question from each of the 3 co-hosting organizations. That would be great. We'll go there, and then we'll move to public questions, which our friend Ian Swain will facilitate. He's an excellent facilitator, and I look forward to him doing so. So thank you, Ed. Fellow ANC commissioners, you all are co-hosts on this. Do you have any questions? I think Commissioner McWood had a couple of questions, but.
Can you hear me, Bo?
Yes, I can, Nancy.
Okay. I did have a question. I was wondering if Ed could tell us where the public can see each of the concepts in the city, actually operating in the city, or maybe in the nearby jurisdictions.
I can't at the moment. This is really contextual. It's specific to Connecticut Avenue, but I think if we can point to some national and regional roads, I will try my best to point you to some of those examples.
Okay. Ed, if you could even give us elements of each of the concepts, for example, the 2-track bike lane or the parking options, just so we can see different elements and how they
Sure.
work.
You know, like,
Thanks.
and we have 15th Street Northwest, and we have the 2-way bike lane there. So yeah, we'll get you some examples of what some of these might look like. Sure.
Thank you.
Ed, if you want to go ahead and try to share, if you need to share the screen later, please try it. We'll shut it off if it doesn't work. I've shared a link in the chat that should work for everybody. It worked for Commissioner Siddiqui. Hopefully it'll work for everybody else too. It's a copy of the PDF you shared this evening. Thank you.
Okay.
And so any other commissioners? All right, well, I have a question for you, Ed. So you talked about timing and in March and April, and you're planning on presenting final presentations or final set of what you've culled down in April. That's correct, right? And
We'll be presenting very similar slides. I'm going to take everyone's comments into account, and then we will do a final set of slides to show to the general public, and you all will be there, I'm sure. So we're going to get your comments, try to incorporate the best of all of the comments into a final presentation that we would then show the general public March 30th and April 1st.
March 30th and April 1st. Thank you very much.
That's what we're shooting for.
Great. Thank you.
Actually, Bo, I have one more question
Go for it, Nancy.
if I can ask it. Ed, the facilitated turn lanes, do you have a list of the potential intersections where you would think about installing those? And did you consider those when you were looking at diversion counts? Because I'm assuming those facilitated left turns might encourage people to leave Connecticut Avenue if it's backed up and go over to a secondary street.
When you say, let me get a clarification, when you say facilitated, do you mean a protected left turn or a left turn pocket, a left turn bay?
Yes.
Okay. Those will actually be designed, if we go forward with an alternative, they would be designed at the 10% concept level after we make an overall recommendation for the corridor. Let me ask Michael Glickman. Michael, you started looking at things on a very peripheral basis, but have you looked at some of those potential left turns at this point?
Well, sure. So I'll address both parts. So in terms of diversion, the model, the way the modeling works for diversion isn't sensitive enough to really change based on turn lanes. But what we have done is, so there's two criteria that would require us to include a turn lane. One would be from an operational standpoint. Well, three, I should say. One's an operational standpoint. If it's helping improve levels of service, decrease delay at an intersection, that would be a reason to include a turn lane. If it meets the criteria for crossing a protected bicycle lane, which is any left turn volume above 50 vehicles per hour under DDOT guidelines, should have a protected left turn lane. And then if there was a safety issue at an intersection that we were trying to address based on accident data. So there is, based on those three factors, we did include turn lanes in our analysis that you would be able, once the traffic report is uploaded onto the project website, you could see those locations. But as Ed mentioned, really the devil's in the details when it comes to that. And when we get to the 10% design, not all of those locations may be feasible based on the competing interests. For instance, concept C, if we can't have a turn lane and a parking lane side by side. So that would be an instance where we'd have to make some trade-offs and determine what would be the most effective use of that space.
Yeah. And I guess, Michael, we could also alternatively say, if we do see potential diversion, we could say no left turn as well.
That's true.
So from a regulatory standpoint, we would look at intersection by intersection and kind of make that evaluation with the community.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Are there any other commissioners who have questions? If not, we'll.
Yeah, I have a quick, and Commissioner Reba does too.
Okay. All right.
Commissioner Reba, you can go ahead.
Thank you. It's really I have a comment and then I have a question. But it's no secret to Ed and the DDOT team and Commissioner Finley, and to some of you who have joined some of our meetings in different capacities when this plan was being presented. But I'm going to echo this to those residents that are joining us this evening. And that is, I have to share with DDOT and the consultants that, once again, I'm going to say this. we have a once in a lifetime opportunity. That's in all of our lives. A once in an opportunity in our lifetimes to change the look, the feel, the aesthetics, the traffic along the Connecticut Avenue corridor, which is a gateway from Maryland into the District of Columbia. We have to ensure that Vision Zero is implemented. And we have to ensure community partners, agency partners are included. I don't know why various agencies haven't been included in pre-conversations and why, based on the plan or option that those along the corridor select, we would have to engage other stakeholders like WMATA. WMATA should have been brought in at the beginning. We should have had their support from the get-go. There should be no question that the agencies and others that would be impacted by these options haven't been already included. I know the plans have to be ironed out. I know a 10% needs to be designed once a concept is developed. But all of these agencies, if not, should already have been included. And quite frankly, while I totally respect the Commission on Fine Arts for all the good work that they've done in our city and their ability to promote, elevate, and showcase the nation's capital in the way that they do, I don't want them interfering with these options along Connecticut Avenue if we are really to ensure that vehicular safety comes first, cyclist safety comes first, vehicular traffic comes first. I mean, we really are here, and the CAC, the Community Advisory Committee, made up of commissioners, has been put into place to ensure that Vision Zero is implemented and that everybody's needs are met. There's some great concepts out there, great concepts that we've discussed at the advisory committee level, but yet it always goes back to, well, we'd have to engage this individual, we'd have to engage this agency, and it may not be doable, it may not work out, and we'd have to circle back around, and the Commission on the Fine Arts won't approve it. Well, who's leading this charge? So I say, again, there is room for bike lanes along the Connecticut Avenue corridor. There is room for parking along the Connecticut Avenue corridor. There is room to remove the reversible lanes. And we have to ensure that if this is going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity for all of us, we have the opportunity to change the look, the feel, the landscape, and the safety measures that's needed along the Connecticut Avenue corridor now and for the next 25 years. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Charlotte, and the team for all your good work. And thank you for being here tonight to present to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Let me just make one response. And, you know, I may not have communicated this exactly, but we do have something called an interagency committee. And we had a meeting, we've been meeting with them since the inception of the project. We met with them in July. We're meeting with them in a couple of weeks again, but we meet constantly with WMATA. We've met with the Office of Planning. We met with the Mayor's Office. We've met with the Zoo. We've met with DOEE. We've met with OP. So we have an interagency group that basically, and then all of the agencies within DDOT as well, our administrations. We review the project and we review the plans, and they're providing input as we go along. So we have our stakeholder groups, and then we have our agency groups. And ultimately, when we have to make a decision, we will convene all of our groups, all of our agencies, and all of our stakeholders, and look at the array of comments, and then try to make the best decision that we can with the agencies as well. But they have been on board. We've been presenting to the agencies and getting their feedback from the very beginning. And I think I told you one of the issues that came up, and I think in one of Bar's questions was WMATA and dedicated bus lanes. And, you know, just so everyone knows, we looked at a dedicated bus lane and bike lane concept very early on. And WMATA basically said, you know, that and our own transit development division, delivery division basically said, we only have a constrained right of way. There are other corridors that they would prioritize over Connecticut Avenue for dedicated bus lanes. And so we are presenting to WMATA, we're presenting to others. And I just wanted to say, if I didn't communicate that, I wanted to make sure that everybody knows.
No, I appreciate that. It's just that if we really are redesigning Connecticut Avenue corridor again to ensure that Vision Zero is implemented in the nation's capital, some of these agencies and the Commission on Fine Arts is going to have to be a little flexible because citizens come first, not commuters. So I thank you, but I needed to put it out there again.
Sure.
It wouldn't be a public meeting had I not. And I will share with you that I think it's important also at some point to identify how the final plan will be decided upon, that it's not just the CAC committee, it's not just DDOT, it's not just some of the community partners, because I think that it's important that whoever is going to make the final decision, that people have an opportunity to lobby and ensure that their voice is heard with these final decisions. So
Sure.
Again, bike lanes, remove a reversible lane, and ensure that we have parking up and down the corridor. Make it safe, make it viable, make it sustainable, make it walkable, make it rideable. Let's create a new vision for this city. And Connecticut Avenue is a good start. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reba. We do want to get to, we only have 14 more minutes left, so we need to go through any commissioner questions that people might have. Are there the commissioners who have questions?
I have a question, but I'm willing to skip if we wanted to move to the community.
Same.
Thank you, Commissioners Siddiqui and Pagets. All right, so we're going to move very quickly to our wonderful co-hosts, not cohorts, though they are in some of our cohort. Bar, do you have a question for our wonderful experts here? Oh, sorry, Bar, I've asked you to unmute and hopefully that'll work.
Thanks very much. I'll try to keep this quick. First of all, really thank you so much, Ed, for the presentation, everybody. It was really very, I thought, thorough and extremely helpful. Two sort of broad questions. One regarding parking. Could you just speak briefly to the issue of how streetscape fits into this project, particularly with regard to parking, and how the business community has reacted to the issue of parking, and whether there's any flexibility for parking off-peak? That sort of collection of questions around parking would be great to understand.
Sure, let me take a stab. This project needs to be independent of the streetscape project. So anything that was designed as part of the Cleveland Park streetscape project will be completed. And the parking, any minor parking removals that they're doing, and any intersection reconfigurations, that project is independent. And I think Cynthia mentioned that if any alternative or option impacted that, it would almost be an option that we can't consider. With regard to parking generally, we've met with all three Main Street organizations, and we did issue a survey, and it's a very limited survey. It's only 36 businesses that responded. It's still live, the survey, so if you can help us get additional businesses to complete the survey, we appreciate that. Thank you. But they did basically, the theme is that if you remove parking, that would affect business viability. I mean, that was the theme of the 36 or so responses that we got. I think we are trying through Concept C, and again, I'm not advocating any concept, but through Concept C, we are able to retain a number of spaces in front of the businesses, be it pickup drop-off spaces, be it loading zones, or parking itself. So again, we would have to look at that when we get to more conceptual design, but as Cynthia said, we're trying to retain at this point of about 120 spaces within the 3 or 4 commercial nodes within the corridor. So we understand that. I think we have to do more due diligence and more detail with parking. Again, concept B takes 0 spaces. Concept B takes about 500 other spaces along the corridor. And a lot of those spaces are in front of the residential buildings, the large condo buildings. We are meeting with the property owner associations of some of those large apartment buildings to get their understanding of what the impacts might be if we removed on-street parking in front of those condominiums. So I hope that answers your question in part.
Thank you very much. And then the second thing, and I'll get off on sort of the safety front. I think it's remarkable, I assume to some people listening on the call, just how much biking could increase with the change to having bike lanes, but I think would certainly be good news for biking. A concern I've gotten from some members, though, is that bikes can be in their own right be dangerous. And if you're going to increase the magnitude of bikes by 30-fold or more, what measures, if any, could be taken to kind of just make sure that at least the bikers are also abiding by traffic law or whatever it might be to kind of reduce that risk, and if there is a risk?
Yeah, I guess that's a question that it's a global question. We try our best for compliance with autos and pedestrians and bicycles, and we'll continue that. But that's a global question that I think we all have to grapple with. I don't have a magic ball right now looking in there, but I think it's a global question that we have to look at. I know another number of jurisdictions are changing laws and regulations for bicyclists. I know Virginia is as well. But I think everybody has to do, as we all say, everybody has to do their part, the pedestrian, the bicyclist, and the driver to make the system work.
Well, thank you, Ed. And we're going to move to a question from the the Woodland Norman Stone Neighborhood Association. Nancy Bryant, you've got your hand up. Unless Jen wants to argue with you.
Oh, no, I think let Nancy speak. I think that would be good.
I thought you'd say that. Thank you, Jen.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't pop on. I was on, but the unmute signal didn't come until Jen was speaking earlier at the beginning of the meeting. I have a question is about how much consideration has been given to, I know they're the secondary roads of where the traffic will be diverted off of Connecticut Avenue if there's a reduction in the traffic on Connecticut Avenue, but how much consideration has been given to then like a third tier of roadways off of because of the traffic reduction. For instance, Reno Road, the chart showed that Reno Road would have to take a lot of traffic as a result of the reducing the traffic on Connecticut Avenue. And one of the things that our neighborhood is concerned about, and it's already an issue, is that the traffic off of Reno Road, in order to avoid the traffic light at the corner of 34th Street and Mass Avenue, leave Reno Road, cut through our neighborhood at either Woodley and go down 32nd and cut through Norman Stone Drive to get to Mass Avenue, just avoiding all the lights altogether. And what's this going to, this is going to be our concern, I'm sure. What's this going to do now to all the traffic that's going to come off of Reno Road and go through Woodley and or Norman Stone Drive, Cleveland? It's going to come right through our neighborhood. And this is going to be a big concern of the Woodland Norman Stone group.
Thank you, Nancy. Just to give you a sense of order of magnitude, I think, and Michael pointed that out a little bit in the traffic diversion slides. And I actually looked, I think that was part of Bar's questions again, and I looked today at Reno, and I'll just give you an example. I think at Tilden, southbound in the morning, there's around 1,000 cars going southbound. And you have about 700 of those cars go through the intersection southbound, and you have around 300 left turns. And I think what our charts show, what our models show, is that there would be approximately 50 additional vehicles that would be put on Reno during the highest peak hour. And as Michael said, it's not just the highest peak hour, but within 5 hours in the morning and in about 5 hours in the evening, you would range probably between 30 and 50 additional vehicles per hour on Reno Road. And that account, in terms of percentages, that's about a 5% to a 7% increase in traffic volumes. And again, I can't specifically talk about all of the roads that you mentioned, but we would look at, when we do develop, if we did develop a plan, we would look at the circulation and the roads to see if there's any signage that's required or do not enter signs or whatever. We would kind of look at the whole network, not just one intersection or one road, and see what we might be able to do from a mitigation standpoint for the network that you're talking about. So again, on an area by area basis, looking at the not just the increase in traffic, but traffic as a whole to see what mitigation we might be able to do.
Ed, thank you so much. Then Bob Ward, do you have a question? From Cleveland Park Smart Growth? Bob, yes. Bob is waving and I've tried to unmute Bob. There we go.
Real quick. Thanks. Real quick. So I just wanted to clarify a couple things. The difference between B and C in the commercial areas regarding parking. B is there is no parking during rush hours, either in the morning or the evening. So it's full lanes of traffic and no parking, no loading, no pickup and drop off at dinner time. C is the ability, now again, just in the commercial area, where one side of the street, and this is part of my question, could it be either side of the street depending on the commercial area? But that would be 24/7. That would be in the morning when businesses need to load. It would be in the evening rush hour when dinner orders are being picked up. And that is an advantage of C over B. I just want to make sure that that's correct.
Yeah, so to answer your question, we're showing it on one side of the street. We're showing parking on the east side of the street, but it has the potential to go on the west side of the street. So this is illustrative at this point. And again, we would come to you and seek your guidance to see, where that based upon the configuration of the road and the transitioning that might be required, where we could put in is either on the west side or the east side or the west side of the street. So I guess the short answer is yes, either side.
And just to follow up on that, there is one section that we have noted that would be better on the west side, and that's over by the zoo. There's a commercial area there. There's much more parking on the west side than the east side at that location. So that'd be a place where we could do it.
Yeah, and I think that commercial area has a pharmacy and a dentist and other areas that wrote to us and asked us if we could look at parking on that side. So thanks, Michael. And I guess the other answer to the other element of your question is 24/7, and that's correct. That any parking we would look at for concept C would be all day long, as opposed to concept B, we would have no parking during the peak hour periods, morning and evening.
Thank you, Ed. So thank you all our wonderful co-hosts, Cleveland Park Smart Growth, Cleveland Park Citizens Association, and the Woodland Norman Stone Neighborhood Association. We'll now we have very short time left. We'll move to public questions, and we'll turn to Ian Swain to facilitate that. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, everyone. Given the time, we're going to try to get as many questions as possible. When I call on you, I'll ask you to unmute, or I'll try to unmute you as well. And then we'll go from there with the one question, so we can try to get as many as we can in. And please remember, we have a copy of the chat transcript. We will address the questions, and the team will get back with you as well. All right, let's go with Neil. You have your one question ready?
Sure, I want to make a comment first, and that is that I've had a little chat on the side with Ed about bus islands, and quite honestly, a bike lane up between the curb where the bus potential passengers are waiting now to have to cross a bike lane with scooters that are traveling about as fast as cars are able to on Connecticut Avenue, maybe a little faster going southbound than northbound based on the hills, will be in a state of terror trying to access the bus island so they can mount the bus. By the way, the bus will no longer be allowed to pull over at the end of the parking area out of the way of traffic going by so that it doesn't block that lane of traffic. My question really is this: has anyone thought about what it is that we would like to achieve with any of this study and massive amount of effort in order to determine the definition of what we think Connecticut Avenue should be used for? Is it a commuter route? Is it for local services only? Does that matter where it is? It seems to me we've got a lot of solutions looking for problems, and we haven't identified at all what it is we really want out of the effort.
Thank you, Neil.
Ed, do you want to comment on that?
I think that was a comment, and again, I think rather than a question, but what I said in the beginning is we're asking the ANC and the public, what is your vision of Connecticut Avenue? What do you see? Help us there, because that will craft the solutions. Again, the issue, the problem or the issue that we started with is 1,500 crashes along Connecticut Avenue and speeding along Connecticut Avenue. And so some of the solutions that we're looking at are trying to address both the safety issue and speeding and making the corridor and the avenue safe for all users. So I think that is the predominant need that we started with based on the request of the ANC several years ago.
Thanks. Next person is Thomas. Would you please ask your question?
Yes, hello. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Oh, good. Okay. Zoom issues. Yes. So I just wanted to quickly mention I was on the call last night with the other ANC just to bring to the attention of the folks here in 3C. So I would like to see potentially in the further DDOT study a look at what are called complete sidewalk. Oh God, I've forgotten what they're called. Complete sidewalks. That's not
continuous sidewalks.
Continuous. Thank you. I really should have rewritten my stuff before I started. Continuous sidewalks, which keep the sidewalk at some of the less traffic side streets at the same level and slows traffic as they're turning off of it. And I hope that DDOT will really actually consider that as a potential in the further design process, and that hopefully some of the ANC people can, look into that and maybe support it. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me what it's called.
Thank you. Stephen, I asked you to unmute. Can you ask your question and then Ed can address it?
Well, I'm sorry, Ian, to interrupt.
No problem.
Thomas, I think your question was whether continuous sidewalks have been explored?
Yes. I guess from my understanding from the representative from DDOT last night, they had not been, particularly looked at in the study so far. But yeah, I'm hoping that, I imagine they would have really wide community support, regardless of people's opinions on bike lanes or parking. Everyone in the neighborhood walks along our sidewalks, whether they get there by bike or on foot. And continuous sidewalks are something that we're starting to see in the US and are getting relatively common in some European cities and really do a lot to slow traffic speeds of turning vehicles as they go onto more residential streets.
Great, thank you. So that was a question you asked last night and then made a comment with today. I appreciate that. And we've noted it. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Sorry about that. Stephen, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. Is that me? Great.
Yes.
Thanks for having me. I do want to ask DDOT, and I asked you guys last night, and I really hope that you take this to heart, is the whole assumptions that you guys are using as far as the amount of traffic that we're to see. Would it be so hard for you guys to assume a 10% reduction in car traffic and to show that to people as to what that would mean? It seems to me that the tipping point for a lot of the diversion issues that you're seeing, the waiting time and the like, would be so greatly reduced with that 10% reduction that any of the alternatives that you were to present might very well be far more appealing to people. And so it just seems that that would be easy to do. I mean, I could even do the math. So can you guys do that for the next time? I would love for you to do that.
We're doing it. We're doing
Yeah,
it. We heard you last night, and we're actually going to test it out on 3 or 4.
Sort of like, it would be fantastic from a like urban planning standpoint, but like it would also, they're probably not going to do it because, you know, they're, oh, I hope I'm not, am I muted? I better
No,
be.
you're not muted, Thomas, but
Hi.
we do need to move on to other comments. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you.
Thanks. Steve, I mean, Ed, are you finished with the addressing that?
I just was saying that, yeah, we heard you, and we're doing a test on 3 or 4 intersections, looking at a 10%, 20% reduction, and see what results we would get. So thank you for that comment, Steve.
The next person was Ezra. Let me find you to unmute you. Sorry, he said he was leaving the meeting. Xavier, we'll go ahead and.
Oh, hello. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Okay. Now
Sorry.
I can. Okay. Thank you.
I was saying I need to leave the meeting after I ask this question because it's been a little bit. But thank you. I bike on Connecticut Avenue now because my parents live in Van Ness, and I actually take kind of a longer route than than you would get recommended on Google Maps, because I don't want to have to bike up Tilden Street or Porter Street, which are extremely steep and pretty intimidating, I think, for all but the best cyclists. So I end up on Connecticut for a pretty long stretch going uphill. Not able to keep up with the speed of traffic at all. So I would definitely love to see bike lanes in the near future. I don't like biking on Connecticut as it is now, and I know that the cars behind me do not like it when I bike on Connecticut either. So I guess my question is, if DDOT, between options B and C, which seem to be the finalists, if DDOT picks option B that keeps the street essentially the way it is now, basically, what's the DDOT message to cyclists? Is it that we should bike on the sidewalk? Is it that we should, keep biking in the street at risk to ourselves and, irritation to cars? Or is it simply that we should not be on Connecticut Avenue at all, and we should avoid going to Woodley Park and Cleveland Park and Van Ness, and avoid politics and pros and bread first until we're ready to buy a car and go that way?
Ezra, we're looking at all stakeholders in the community, the bicyclists, as well as the businesses and the residents, and we're going to have to weigh a decision and look at the trade-offs of all of the factors, and so we're doing our best to look at the array of factors in the corridor, and so, thank you for your comment, and I would say let's provide your thoughts to the ANCs, and when the ANCs provide a resolution to DDOT, we'll look at we'll look at everything. But again, as Cynthia said, we may not be able to do the full purpose and need because there's so many conflicting needs in the corridor, be it loading and emergency vehicle access and bicycles and peds and trucks. We're trying to accommodate as many of those needs as possible.
Thanks, Ezra. Thanks, Ed. Xavier, your question, please.
Yeah, it's the questions I have in the text. It seems that your statements of traffic analysis seem to focus almost entirely on vehicle movements on the roadway itself, as opposed to making any consideration for the total number of people that are moving. We're only looking at the vehicles that are moving. And there doesn't seem to be any consideration that any of the people that are currently in cars may change to pedestrian, bike, bus, or any of the alternatives that we're attempting to implement. Is there any approach or any study that we're looking at that does anything other than just a pure level of service from vehicular movements?
I think you have to look at multimodalism in a couple of different facets. The model itself that we have, for good or for bad, it's a traffic model, and the outputs of those models are cars. We have to ground truth what comes out of the model with all the other modes in the corridor, and so it's not just a numbers analysis, because I think we showed you the different levels of the order of magnitude of cars and buses and metro riders and bicycles in the corridors. It's really how can we provide on the ground facilities and improvements and engineering and design and operations that would make a more conducive environment for the different modes. So, you know, the models that we have, sure, we have the numbers that come out of it, and we have to ground truth those numbers with what you're telling us, what you see every day in the corridor. And in addition to that, we're looking at you know, designs and operations that we can do, signal timing and leading pedestrian intervals, and left turn calming treatments, and the kinds of improvements that would make it conducive for people to be able to walk and bike and go to transit and the metro without fear of their safety. So I think it's not just numbers, it's looking at the array of the design and the operations in the corridor for multimodalism.
Okay. One other thing, have we considered any lane narrowing options? I know it's a freight route and there's bus routes, but have we looked at pulling to 8 or 9 foot lanes in certain places?
We did in the very early aspects of the very early on in the study, and I guess the agencies, as I talked about, basically said no. We can have a 9-foot turn lane, but to have a 9-foot travel lane on a corridor with 30,000 cars a day basically would provide a safety problem, and that's something we want to avoid. And buses also need at least 10 feet to traverse the road.
Thanks, Ed. Everybody, I want to point out that DDOT right now is staying past the time that we had allotted for this meeting and past the time they had allotted for this meeting. So I really want to thank Ed and his team. And Ian, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Yep, Ryan, go ahead and ask your question. Eddie, you mind for 2 more questions?
We're good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just ask on that front. Do you know what the width of the lanes on Connecticut Avenue in Chevy Chase are at north of the circle?
I don't.
They are significantly narrower. I'm just saying, and it handles a similar volume of traffic. The idea that we can't narrow the lanes within the district
Yeah, this
I
is
understand why we can't on where the buses are, but the idea that you couldn't do it on the middle ones seems flawed to me. I'll just say, you know, we should mention that the red line does on average carry another about 100,000 passengers under this corridor every day. And that's a low estimate, pre-pandemic at least. And I'll just say, you know, I really do. I think that bus boarding islands are a crucial part of this project moving forward. I would really like to see that with option C. I've seen it done many places very safely within the US and in Europe. You know, that's sort of a more minute detail down the road. But I think, you know, we can get it right. I think shifting as many people to non-car modes and to a safer street is exactly what this project is about and what we need to design for as a city in both our, you know, sort of individual goals, but also, you know, our goals as a city and our goals as a planet, you know, with regards to climate change, and with regards to making sure every user is safe. I bike and bus on this corridor every single day, and I fear for my life multiple times a week.
Thanks, thanks, Ryan.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say, in particular, you know, we really do need to pay particular attention to pedestrian safety at your Calvert streets, at Nebraska, at Tilden, etc. These, you know, or Porter is a better example there. So I really hope you guys take a very hard look at pedestrian safety there in particular. Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks, real quick, for those of you who have questions in the chat, We really appreciate them. I know DDOT does as well. DDOT has their, DDOT will post their project email in the chat. And so if you have questions that are not able to be answered tonight, you can send them to the DDOT project email. They are very responsive. They're wonderful folks, and hopefully they'll get you the information you need. Sorry to interrupt. Thanks.
And the email address and the website is also in the slides, at the end of the slides that you have as well.
Thanks, Bo. We'll turn it back over to you then.
Okay. DDOT, can I convince you to stick around for a question or more too? Or I understand it's getting late.
Ian, okay with you?
Oh, this is terrible. Ian,
yeah, put it on.
Ian's,
yes, that's
Ian,
fine.
Ian's a great facilitator, and Ian is doing Lord's work right now. So I want to give Ian some shine right now. Thank you, Ian.
No problem. James Harnett, you still have a question?
No, sorry. I just wanted to make my comment in the chat, but thanks for calling on me.
Okay. No problem at all. Can anybody raise their hand who may have a question? We're going once and going twice. So before we wind down.
Tuesday night auction, folks.
Yeah. All right.
Well, that was easy. Thank you all for coming, and thank you DDOT for coming and present to us, and thank you Cleveland Park Citizens Association. Thank you Woodland Normanstone Neighborhood Association, and thank you Cleveland Park Smart Growth for participating and co-hosting. And thank you everybody for joining us this evening. I'm your AM radio host, Bo Finley. Anyhow, and if you check the chat, you will see an email address to contact DDOT if you have further questions. If you have comments you would like to let ANC3C know about, you would email all@anc3c.org. That's ORG. And you can let us know how you feel about all these options. We appreciate hearing from folks, and a couple of us are on the Commissioner Lee, Brian Reba, and myself. We're on the committee that Mr. Stoloff talked about earlier. So once again, thank you all so much for joining, and please shoot us emails if you have questions or comments. Have a great night.
Hello? Thank you for having us.
Yes, Ms. Duxworth, yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to, again, to thank everyone and to let you all know that we will be sending out information shortly on the March public meeting. So Bo will be looking to you all too to help get that information out as well. It will be March the 30th and April the 1st, as Ed mentioned.
Thank you so much. We will put that out on the normal places we put our public notice for our meetings. And so folks, keep an eye out for that, especially those of you on the Cleveland Park listserv. Thank you all for joining this evening. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.